Welcome to An Idiot Does Stuff. This is a short video series on how an idiot basically makes his way through trying to make his YouTube content better. While this video series is largely for drum covers, I hope you find some useful information for other types of content. Today I'm going to go over video editing software, specifically Microsoft Photos and DaVinci Resolve 17. To save some disappointment here, before you get too far, this really isn't a how-to. It's more of a review and information for people who are looking for different editing software. So when I started making videos a few years ago, it was Microsoft Photos that I was using. The software itself is really basic. It doesn't do a lot, but it's easy to figure out and it's easy to use. Microsoft Photos allows you to clip video footage, to simply split it. There's some pretty limited text options and some cheesy 3D graphics you can throw in there. And most importantly, it allows you to add your own custom audio, which is good if you do drum videos and mix your audio from your drum tracks separately. The two biggest issues with Microsoft Photos is that it is basic. And while that makes it easy to use, it also makes it a little frustrating if you want to do anything more than make a straight video. The second issue is the time it takes, especially if you have more than one camera angle and you do your audio in a DAW or a separate software. Without getting too deep into the weeds, I have 3 cameras and I had to edit each one of those camera angles separately, and that includes syncing the audio into each camera angle. Once that was all done, then I could combine those into one, but then had to clip each one meticulously all the way through and make sure the audio was synced again before going to final video. It was taking me way too long, and that's not even counting the amount of time that I spent mixing the audio and getting that ready. And collectively, it was consuming more time than it was becoming worth, which is why I started looking for another program. I'm not knocking Microsoft Photos too much. It's free and it's easy and it'll get you to the finish line if you want to make a video. And if you wanted to use or try Microsoft Photos for your next video edit, I'll throw out some helpful tips for you. 1. While you can choose different resolutions, it is limited to 1080p. It won't do 4K, it won't do 2K video at all. 2. It only exports to 30 frames per second. Actually, no matter what you put into it, it's going to spit it out the other side at 30 frames per second. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, then perhaps Photos is a good software for you. 3. If you need to edit video or clip it down, I strongly suggest using the split feature versus the clip feature. The clip feature seems very manual and it's hard to be precise versus the split feature, which you can actually go to the frame per second and clip at that point. Split also has another useful feature, which is number 4, and that's how you can sync your audio and make sure that the drum hit is exactly where it needs to be. But again, it takes a lot of time to go through and individually clip a few frames at a time to get it right into sync. And if you wanted another tip as far as that's concerned, clap 3 times to help with syncing a video. It'll help with both your audio and your video, and it'll probably make what I just explained a lot easier to do. So I did a lot of searching on the internet to see what people were saying the best editing software was. And I actually saw DaVinci Resolve a bunch of times. This is a gift and a curse though, because it is really a true professional video editing software, which means that it presents its own set of challenges in trying to use it if you're not a video editor, and it has more features than you'll probably ever need or know how to use unless that's your trade. I'm struggling to figure out which one I really want to start with, the good or the bad, but I guess I'll start with the good. If you've seen any other videos I've done outside of the interviews and the drum covers, you probably already know that I just record practices. And what that really means is I'm recording 4 hours of footage at a time plus, and then clipping that down into individual tracks, which was the annoying part of Photos because I had to individually clip each one of those 4-hour clips down to whatever song I happened to be looking for. The biggest feature to me is the auto sync feature. Whereas before I had to take individual video clips, find the song, take the audio, put it in there and try and sync it, DaVinci actually gives you the option of auto syncing. So I can take 4 hours worth of footage in a 4-minute song, put it into the same space, click auto sync, and smack my mama, it'll put it right where it needs to be. I don't need to look for the song or anything, and I can go and clip. Now, it doesn't do it perfectly all the time. You still have to do some minor adjustments to it, but for the most part, it's pretty good. On top of that, as I bring in new camera angles, same thing. Click the auto sync and it puts it right where it needs to be, and then I can clip 4 once all of them have been synced with each other. In one window, you can have all your graphics, all your photos, all your video footage, your audio footage. You can zoom all the way in or all the way out, and you can actually clip it down to the frame itself, which is far more precise than Photos ever was. You can also link and unlink your video and your audio tracks, which to me is really useful because once you get it in sync, if you happen to slip on the mouse and move it out of a place that it needs to be, then you got to go back and figure all that stuff out again, versus just being able to link the video and the audio footage. The other benefit to that is as you bring in other camera tracks, they obviously have their own associated audio, and all you have to do is unlink them and then delete the audio for that camera, and it's using your audio track versus trying to clip all that stuff too. The biggest reason that I ended up going with DaVinci is just the endless features that you have with DaVinci. You can take a clip of footage, you can zoom out and zoom in, you can pan it to the left, you can pan it to the right, you can make it transparent, you can soften the edges, you can overlay footage, you can automate it, you can put pictures within inside of it, it'll make you the perfect omelet. You get my point. There's a lot of stuff in there, probably more than you'll ever need. And then lastly, there's color matching features. Now, I'm not a video editor, and I think in my last video I said I'm not an audio engineer either. So there's a lot of things about the color function that I don't understand and probably don't care to understand. What I did like specifically is there is a color match feature within DaVinci, which really just means that if you have different camera angles and they have different temperatures, they look different slightly, all you have to do is clip the one that you want to change and click the one that you like and just put match shot to this clip, and it'll automatically match it for you. The contrast, the color, the temperature, everything. And while not completely perfect, it will make all your video footage look close to, if not the same. There's also an audio section within DaVinci, which I largely don't use because I have a separate DAW, so I do most of my audio editing there and then just bring that track in. But if by chance there was something that needed to be addressed, I can address it. Now, I only saw basic features again because I haven't played with it a whole bunch, but you do have audio filters, you have an EQ, you can zoom all the way in the track. But the most useful feature to me on the audio is when I need to sync, do that little fine tuning after I click that auto align by waveform, I can just drag it and it's not bound by frames like it is in the editing section on the video footage. The other thing that's really nice is you can link projects and you can go back and forth between your projects pretty easily. The benefit to me personally is you have these features that you want to throw in there, either a picture and maybe you want to continue to use that one. You could just go into the other project and grab it and bring it over without having to recreate it. So an example would be the like and subscribe button here. I can take this and continuously use it without having to recreate the wheel every single time. Another huge time saver. Second to last is that you can export in 4K if you wanted to. I don't think 8K is a feature as of right now, but 4K is probably good. And even for your YouTube videos, at least in my experience, if I upload anything in 2K or 4K, it just shows in 1080 anyways. And probably the best bit, it's free. Every feature and option that I've discussed here, it's in the free version. You could get the paid version, which I'll get to in a minute. But if you just want it free, So all that leads me to the bad. DaVinci Resolve is a hungry software. I didn't have a crap computer, but I didn't have a gaming computer, 16 gig of RAM. I actually got it because I wanted it to be a little faster, and I understand 16 isn't super fast, but for most desktops and most people's uses it is. What DaVinci really requires is a minimum of 16, but it recommends more, and then you need to have a badass system and a badass GPU to be able to do all the things that you need to do within DaVinci. Because if not, it'll just drive you insane. Do you have to buy a gaming computer? No. Will it drive you nuts if you don't? It will. Especially for the free version. The free version is limited, but one of the biggest limitations for people who use a PC versus a Mac is that there is no hardware acceleration. So when the system is really bogging down, instead of optimizing the things that it's using, it just keeps asking for more. And all it'll do is drag your system down more and more and more. And the only way you can get hardware acceleration is if you buy the paid version, which is $300. So yes, $300 is cheaper than a gaming PC. But the funny thing is, even if you paid for the software, it's not enough. What most people have in their Beats laboratory or in their office is not going to be a bulky enough computer to be able to handle the resources that DaVinci demands. And if you don't get a better computer, what you'll end up with is having to find tips and tricks to actually make the system work so that it's not choppy, and you can actually edit the video without having to create a version just so that you can see whether it's in sync or see whether it's choppy or so forth. Because really, if you don't have the right system, it's just going to labor on and labor on and labor on. Which, again, going back to my point, I got this software because it's supposed to be less time consuming, and with all the features it should be. But if I have to wait for the system to drag itself to the point it needs to be, then it just ends up taking as much time, if not slightly less than it did when I was using Photos. So there are some tricks you can do, and you can Google it if you want. I won't explain them here because if you've never been in the system, it probably won't make a lot of sense to you anyways. But in short, if you're thinking about going to DaVinci, you need at least 16 gig of RAM in your computer. And that RAM needs to be expandable to more if you happen to need it. You're also going to need a serious graphics card. And when I say serious graphics card, NVIDIA line, GTX, RTX, and better, which, again, if you want to Google how much they are, they're not cheap. You're also going to need a solid state drive, and you're still probably going to have to buy the paid version if you only get minimum requirements. This really is for the free version itself, is that it will hound you like you owe it money. And you do, really, because they're giving you a software for free. But I mean, in the middle of things, it'll say, you've reached your limitation, do you want to upgrade yet? And it'll do that like 12 times in like a 5-minute span of you trying to get something done, which is really frustrating. I wanted to do this video for some time now, but I needed to get acclimated to Resolve specifically, and it's been a couple of months of me messing with it. And I didn't really know specifically what video I would put, whether it be a how-to or a review or whatever, until I actually spent some time with it and got it to work on my own. If you've listened to my pretty lackluster review of DaVinci Resolve and you want to jump both feet in, and don't get me wrong, DaVinci is a really good software, especially when you compare it to, say, Adobe, which is subscription-based, or other software, which you would also have to learn and probably still figure out, and I'm sure has its own set of frustrations. But if you want to move to DaVinci Resolve, here are some tips that I can give you right now before you try. So number one, and most important, if you're going to use more than one camera, you need to have settings where you can go and make the frames per second the same on each camera. This is something that if you were a video editor, you would know, but if you're not a video editor, you probably don't know. And please go check your camera right now, because if you don't have a setting where you can change the frame rate per second, you might not want to get DaVinci at all, because if they happen to come out at different frame rates and you don't know that, or they do come out at different frame rates and you do know that, it's really not going to work, or you're going to become a hermit person. While resolution, 720, 1080p, 2K, and 4K is not as important as the frame rate is, it's still pretty important for a good experience. And by that, what I mean is if your cameras only do 4K as an example, and your computer isn't up to the task, it's still going to drive you insane. It doesn't have to be the exact same, but you should think about what you're going to output the video at before you even start filming. You should think about exposure and ISO and shutter speed. Finally, most of the cameras that people use to make their content, specifically drum cover videos, your GoPros, your Zoom cameras, and so forth, they all make a compressed codec, which is H.264. I don't really know what that is. I just know that it is a compressed video format that your computer has to read. And because it's compressed, what DaVinci and your computer need to do is decompress it and decode it as it's going through the editing process. And because it's compressed, it's pretty labor intensive. It's the reason why most of the cameras you see from professional people are these big bulky things, is because they will actually do different formats, mostly that aren't compressed and mostly that aren't going to bog down your machine. But if you're already taxing your machine either with the resolution or the lack of RAM or the lack of a good video card, you're only going to bog it down more, again, more frustration. In the end, obviously what I ended up doing was getting a better machine. And if you want a helpful tip there, I'll tell you, don't go to Amazon, don't go to Best Buy, don't go to your big retailers, don't go to Newegg as an example. A buddy of mine who's in the IT field pointed me out to a website that I'll link here at the bottom for you, where you can actually get all the parts you need, you just have to assemble it yourself. Now I'll tell you, I probably saved about $1,000 doing this, but the aggravation of that is a whole nother video. So be sure that if you're going to use my link, that you're comfortable putting computer components together, or have a friend who's really generous with his time and willing to do it for you. So thanks for watching. I hope you got something out of this. If you have specific questions about DaVinci Resolve and really want a simple explanation, I'll try to answer them for you, at least direct you to the right spot. If you want me to do a specific how-to video with DaVinci, please also leave that in the comments, and if I get enough, I'll definitely consider doing one. And if you just want to scream because you're as aggravated as I am or have been over the past couple of months, feel free to vent, and we can share in our misery. Thanks for watching. Please be on the lookout for other videos like this. Please like and subscribe, and hopefully you like some of my other content.